All right, we are back on page number 4, large bodies of water. You'll notice there that our next body of water that we're going to look at a little bit more in depth is the Mediterranean Sea, also known as the Great Sea. If you go ahead and pull your map out, that's the Roman Empire. That'll give you a full look at that area. And up on the screen, you have the Mediterranean Sea there, also the Great Sea, of course. And on the Roman Empire, you see there above, this runs from, of course, where we see it says Caesarea there. That right there where it says Caesarea, you have Israel. And that runs all the way over to modern-day Spain. And if you notice on your map, you'll notice there that it has a very narrow strait. That's known as the Strait of Gibraltar. That is it's only 8 miles wide. So you can imagine that is a very narrow area when you stop to consider that spot. Of course, you have to the north there, and that's not in your notes, but you have there the Rock of Gibraltar, which is on the side of where Spain is today. So the Mediterranean Sea separates Europe, North Africa, and Southwestern Asia. Southwestern Asia being where you would see Arabia, Israel. You have Europe there, of course, to the north. You have modern-day Italy, France, Greece would be up in this area where the Aegean Sea is. You have North Africa, which, of course, you have Egypt. You have some of your other African nations there as well, just the upper part of Africa. So the Mediterranean Sea separates all this out. Of course, it's linked to the Atlantic Ocean by the way of the Strait of Gibraltar. It's connected with the Black Sea through the Sea of Marmara, which actually, let me see if that's in here. You have the Aegean Sea, but in between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea, you have this other one that's named here. Let me see if I have a map with that in it. I'm not sure if I do. I may not. And I'm sorry about that. But this sea here connects the Black Sea with, and the Aegean Sea is just an extension, of course, of the Mediterranean, much like some of the others that you see around the world. It's just a smaller portion of, say, the Atlantic. You have the Gulf of Mexico and all that. This covers approximately 2,500 miles from east to west, the Mediterranean Sea. The average depth is 4,900 feet, and the maximum depth is 17,280 feet. It's biblically called the Great Sea, and you see that in Numbers 34, 6 through 7. We won't turn to all these because just for sake of time, you see that also in Joshua 1:4 and Ezekiel 47, 1 through 12. It's called the Great Sea. The main Palestine ports of the Old Testament was Joppa and Tyre. Let me see. We'll look back. Let me go back. Look at your Old Testament world map again. You'll see, and I got to get back to it. I'm going to zoom in. So where you have the Great Sea. You'll see Joppa. Where it says, at the end there it says sea, the Great Sea, you have Joppa. So you have the Old Testament ports of Joppa, and north of there you have Tyre, which is right where it says Phoenicia. You have the seaport of Tyre, T-Y-R-E. So those were your Old Testament seaports that you would read about. Of course, again, Jonah went down to Joppa. The New Testament, you have Caesarea. Caesarea, and you don't have it on the map there, but it would just have been north of Joppa, where it says Samaria. It would just be right in there. But below Dor, Samaria is right there. In fact, Caesarea is not far from, it's just south of modern-day Haifa, which is this little, when you look above Samaria there, you see that little jet, where it jets out there, the land. where it jets out into the Great Sea and then it comes back. You see where it says Mount Carmel? That right in that little place that jets out is modern-day Haifa. And Haifa is a decent-sized city there. And, of course, you also have Ashdod. And Ashdod is south. It's above where it says Gaza. So just above Gaza, you have modern-day Ashdod. And just above Samaria there, actually where it says Mount Carmel, you have Haifa, modern-day Haifa. Mount Carmel is near modern-day Haifa. This is Mount Carmel that Elijah slew the false prophets. We read that in the last class. If you remember, he slew the false prophets there after they had tried sacrificing to Baal. Also, Mount Carmel is where you have where the cloud that was like a man's hand came up out of the sea, that sea being the Mediterranean Sea. If you turn over to 1 Kings 18, we'll read that here. 1 Kings 18, this is after the slaying of the prophets, or slaying of the false prophets, the prophets of Baal. 1 Kings 18, and you look at verse 41. Verse 41. And it says, And Elijah said unto Ahab, Get thee up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of abundance of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and this is Mount Carmel, and he cast himself down upon the earth, and put his face between his knees, and said to his servant, Go up now, look toward the sea. Well, that sea he's looking toward, if you look at your maps there, obviously he's looking out into the Great Sea. He's looking out to the Mediterranean Sea there. And he says here, and the servant looked, he went up and looked and said, verse 43, There is nothing. And he said, Go again 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time, he said, Behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea like a man's hand. And he said, Go up, saying to Ahab, Prepare thy chariot and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. So this cloud that looks like a man's hand was coming up out of the Mediterranean Sea out there. And he was looking out toward from Mount Carmel there, which Mount Carmel is very close to Haifa. This same site is where Mount Carmel is where Elisha would also do some of his work. Elisha travels from Jericho to Bethel in 2 Kings 2. And in 2 Kings 2, he travels there with Elijah and travels from Bethel to Mount Carmel. And from Mount Carmel, he travels back to Samaria. If you turn over to 2 Kings 2 in verse number 24. 2 Kings 2 in verse 24. This is where he was mocked by the children of the city. And he called, and we have the 2 she-bears that came out and actually killed them, 40 and 2 children there. In verse 25, it says, And he went from thence to Mount Carmel, this Elisha here, and from thence he returned to Samaria. So Carmel being Mount Carmel there, and he came back down to Samaria, just south there, of course. And so you have those occurrences in those areas. And that's why I say, as you know geography, you have an understanding of this travel. Remember, I just said that Elisha traveled from Jericho. Jericho, I don't know if it's on this map here, but Jericho is going to be on the River Jordan. It's going to be on the left-hand side of the River Jordan. River Jordan's running up from the Dead Sea, or it runs from north from Galilee. You see Galilee there in the map, there just to the right of Mount Carmel, where we were just looking at. So you have Galilee, that body of water there, just to the right of Galilee, runs down this little line here. That's the Jordan River, if you see the River Jordan. And it goes down to the Dead Sea. Well, just north of the Dead Sea, you have Jericho, north of there. And that's, of course, where Joshua takes the children of Israel across. So you have Elisha here traveling from Jericho to Bethel. And if you look to the right, you look to the left, if you go west, if you go to the left, you see Jerusalem there, you see Bethel. So Bethel, and then he travels from Bethel to Mount Carmel, and then from Mount Carmel back down to Samaria. So he's traveled all this area. Now, here's something you got to keep in mind is Israel And we'll look at this further as we look into Palestine. We'll look at the distances. But Israel today really is not all that big. Some, in fact, this book where a lot of these maps come from, they compare it to your New England area. And if you've spent any time in New England, things are very close. If you remember on the trip how that we were in Boston, and we came from Boston, we went through and we passed Providence, Rhode Island, and from Providence we went on down to New York. That's a very tight area. And Israel's is small, really, when you think about it, when you see just where everything's located. It's a very small area, but still on foot. This is some traveling. And so you have the Mediterranean Sea here. Persian Gulf, we know where that's at. Let's zoom out again. I'm going to try to run through some of these fairly quickly. Persian Gulf is on the right-hand side, the bottom part of your map. It's 615 miles long. It leads to the Indian Ocean. It's fed by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Now remember, the Euphrates River, if you look on your map, of the two rivers that you see here that runs up to the Fertile Crescent, the one on the left is the Euphrates River, and the one on the right is the Tigris. Remember, Tigris, modern-day Baghdad, sits on the Tigris River. It's seldom over 300 feet deep. That is the Persian Gulf. And it's bordered by Persia, which is modern-day Iran, on the east, and the Arabia on the west. That is Saudi Arabia today. The Caspian Sea, which is just north, straight north of there, it's the world's largest inland sea. It's a salt lake, and it's 640 miles from north to south. And it's east of the Black Sea. Remember, we mentioned that the Black Sea, of course, it's not on your Old Testament map there, but it's on your, I think it's on your Roman Empire map, that the Black Sea is just north of Turkey, modern-day Turkey, or as we know it from this map, it's Asia Minor. So the Black Sea is just north. It's the body of water that lies north of Asia Minor. These things are going to be important as we move forward. The Red Sea divides Africa and Arabia. That is, you think about it here, we move down and we look at our Old Testament map again. You have the Red Sea. Remember, the Red Sea is the sea where the children of Israel would cross in Exodus. And you have Egypt, which is in Africa, just on the upper north part, right-hand part of Africa. And then you have the Red Sea that divides Africa. You have the Red Sea that divides Africa from Arabia, from Saudi Arabia today. And so you have the Red Sea there. Again, you have your notes there. Exodus 13 talks about some of that. It's right before they cross the Red Sea there in Exodus 13 and 14. The Red Sea is 1,400 miles long, and it leads to the Indian Ocean. If you think about your world and you think about that part of the world, it empties into the Indian Ocean, which, of course, is there to the right of Africa. It's an intense blue-green in color and sometimes turns to a reddish-brown color by the algae that's in it. Important rivers. We've been talking about the Tigris. Remember, you want to keep this in mind. The Tigris River, if you look on your map, is the upper one. It's the one on the right. It's your Tigris River. It's about 1,200 miles long, and it's called the Hiddekel River in Genesis 2:14 and in Daniel 10:4. And of course, the Tigris is one. Now, how it ran before the flood, no one truly knows, but it's mentioned again in Daniel, so we know that you have the Tigris there. It's also known as the Hiddekel in a couple places in Scripture. It joins the Euphrates about 100 miles north of the Persian Gulf. When I say north, it's north of. I mean, it's sort of northwest of the Persian Gulf, but it's up north of the Gulf there. But it joins the Euphrates there. The three great Assyrian capitals, Nineveh, which we've already mentioned, Calah and Ashur, were on its banks. And of course, Nineveh there, you have that there. Nineveh sits there up on the banks of the Tigris River. The Euphrates River is about 1,700 miles in length. And its first biblical mention, of course, is in Genesis 2:14, when it talks about the Garden of Eden. And you have the Euphrates there. Babylon and Ur were on its banks. Now, Ur is not clearly marked here in this map, but I will go ahead and tell you, if you will mark on your Old Testament map, if you go ahead and mark to the bottom, you see where it says Chaldea. You see where it looks like there's like some, how do I describe this? It looks like there's some vegetation or something in the green. It goes from green. It says Arphaxad. If Ur was in that area there, Ur of the Chaldees. So you see Chaldea. Does everyone see Chaldea? So you have the Persian Gulf, and then my screen went off, and it comes back. You have the Persian Gulf there. It says Persian. If you go up the left one, which is the Euphrates River, if you go up there, right in where it looks like some it's supposed to be a swampy area, you have there Chaldea. So on the banks there of the Euphrates, you have Ur. So just right below Arphaxad, just right in there on the river, you had Ur. It's also known as Ur of the Chaldees. So you have Ur there, and you also have Babylon that was set there. It was on its banks. Biblical titles. Let's turn to 2 Kings 23. We're in 2 Kings. If you haven't turned away, we were in 2 Kings already. 2 Kings 23. 2 Kings 23, look at verse number 31. It says, 2 Kings 23, verse number 29. 29, it says, in his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates, and King Josiah went out against him. This is what I was referring to earlier. And he slew him at Megiddo when he had seen him. So you have the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. So you have Pharaoh Necho coming up. He wants to war against the king of Assyria. And it says the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. So remember I mentioned Carchemish earlier? And you see the Euphrates River runs all the way up. If you follow the Euphrates River, it runs all the way up into that yellow. You have Carchemish up there in the yellow, just to the left of the pinkish land area. So notice 2 Kings 23:29, but then turn to 2 Chronicles. So hold your place there in 2 Kings 23, but turn 2 Chronicles 35. This is just another account of the same occurrence. 2 Chronicles 35, this gives us some insight as to putting pieces together in the Bible. 2 Chronicles 35, look at verse number 20. 35:20. 2 Chronicles 35:20. It says, after all this went Josiah, and this is the same Josiah that you had there in 2 Kings, went Josiah. After all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, Necho, that's Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him. So now you see that Carchemish would have been one of their major cities there. It would have been a part of Assyria. And so you see there that passage. So that's why I say you have Assyria running from here to where you see Mesopotamia on over, Nineveh. You have that whole land area that would have been Assyria. And so you see the pieces being put together, though. You see in 2 Kings 23 where it says that Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. Well, where did he go? We have Carchemish. And so you see that piece being put together there. And so that's what's going on. We won't turn to these places, but it's called the river in Exodus 23:31. In fact, we know it's referring to the river Euphrates because if you turn to that passage, and you don't have to right now, but you can later, it even says the river Euphrates. So it's called the river sometimes. And in references in the Bible. Deuteronomy 11:24, it's called the river. It's called the Great River in Genesis 15:18 and Deuteronomy 1:7. And I believe in one of those passages it refers to the Great River, the River Euphrates. So it's given those titles. It flows northward through Lebanon. So if you look there on your Old Testament maps, I want to zoom in for you all. It's going to be hard to see. If you look there where Cyprus is on your maps out in the Great Sea, you see Cyprus. Go to your right, and you'll see Emesa, and you'll see the river there that's running up, and you'll see you'll see it there. You can circle it, but that is Orion's river. It runs, what's interesting is this river runs northward through Lebanon and then into the Mediterranean. So it doesn't run down, it runs out of Lebanon, and then it makes a hook. And at that hook is where Antioch is or was. You might even see it. It's kind of faint there on that map. But Antioch would sit on that river there in upper Lebanon. So you have that river there, and it would flow northward through Lebanon and then into the Mediterranean. Antioch and Hamath would sit on its banks. Now, it's not mentioned directly in Scripture, but you have that river there, on your map. The Nile River, of course, is the longest river in the world, over 4,000 miles long. I don't think we can get a really good picture. We'll have some of it. You'll have the delta here that runs out into the Mediterranean. That delta is over 140 miles wide there. The river itself is 4,000 miles long, and in 1960s it supported a population of 50 million near it. 50 million people. Longest river in the world. Its two main sources meet at Katorum. And Blue Nile flows from the highlands of Ethiopia. So let me change maps here. Let me see if we've got a better map. Actually, just look at this one. Let me see if that Roman map gives you some. It doesn't give you a lot. It gives you a little bit more. If you want to change to your Roman map, you'll see it shows Alexandria and Memphis there sitting on the Nile River. Not our Memphis, Tennessee, but Memphis in Egypt. You'll see Alexandria. In this picture here, you'll see Alexandria, and you'll see Cairo up there at the delta. Well, if you look further, the Blue Nile flows from the highlands of Ethiopia. So you see here, Ethiopia, if you look at the Nile River, and you can pull this up also at home, if you look up just the Nile River, you'll see it. But you'll see that it runs over into Ethiopia on a map of Africa. The Blue Nile will diverge from the rest of it. The Nile River will diverge and will make the White Nile and the Blue Nile, and that does that at Katorum. And then the Blue Nile runs over into Ethiopia. And you can turn your page there. The White Nile flows through Lakes Victoria and Albert. And if you look further south, you'll see that. It's not on your maps there, but you'll see, if you look up at the screen, Lake Victoria and Lake Albert. The White Nile ends there at Lake Victoria in Kenya. Actually, that's Uganda. Sorry. Uganda. But you see there that it ends at Lake Victoria. It's one of the few great rivers which flows, and this is something to remember, from south to north. From south to north. That's why you have the delta in Egypt. It flows into the Mediterranean Sea. So if there was no boundaries, and yet there is, if you notice there in your notes, there are several waterfalls the further south you go. But if I was to be able to float a boat down the Nile River, I could theoretically, without the waterfalls, I could go from Lake Victoria all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. So obviously there's hindrances there to navigate, as our notes say there. But you have the delta there is 140 miles on each side. It's very fertile there in the delta. That's why you see Egypt that cropped up. Much of the inhabitants would have lived off right on the Nile back many, many years ago, even in the times of the Bible. That's why it was very important when the Lord would turn the river to blood. This was their source of life. Without it, what were they supposed to do? They would die. And so the Nile River was given them it was a life source. Of course, it has multiple streams. We know that from Exodus chapter 2, where Moses was placed into the flags there. Obviously, he wasn't placed right out into the river, but it has many streams, many little jetties probably out from there. But he was setting the flags there as a baby. We see that it contains 6 waterfalls, which hinders the navigation. The first being at Aswan, and the 6 below Katorum. So there's waterfalls in here. The Nile's annual flooding, which is caused by heavy tropical rains from Ethiopia and in the African basin, provides fertile soil for agriculture in the river valley that runs from 3 to 10 miles wide. So along this river, they're able to grow. That's why it's so important that the river and what it supplies. Now, mountain ranges. We'll go back to our Old Testament map. Mountain ranges. I'm trying to get through here, but also give you all what you need. This is a very important part of our overall geography, because this sets you up to know where everything's at. So even if you need to, I can get you other maps that could help more if you want them. But whatever you need, this is very important. This is a foundational part of this lesson. Arat, of course, is the landing place of Noah's Ark. We see that in Genesis 8:4. You can turn over there and we'll see it. Genesis 8:4. I know this is kind of technical, and I'm trying as much as I can not to make it too dry. The rough thing is, I grew up as a young boy sitting over a map and just looking at maps for over an hour. So this is me, but I don't want it to be dead for you all. Genesis 8:4, it says, "And the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Arat." Arat. Again, it's the landing place of Noah's Ark, and it's midway between the Black and Caspian Seas. So you see there on your map again, you have the Caspian Sea to your right, and again on the Old Testament map there you don't see the Black Sea, but it's just north of Asia Minor. If you look at your map, just to the left of the Caspian Sea, we pointed this out earlier, you may have already made note of it, but if you look, and I'm trying to zoom in if you're trying to look at it, but those at home, you'll just want to look to the left of the Caspian Sea. You'll see Arat spelled out. Of course, there's mountain ranges there. But if you look closer above Arat, you'll see Mount Mt.Arat. It's Mount Arat there. And it's midway between the Black and Caspian Seas. Its present-day boundaries is that of Armenia, Georgia, the country of Georgia, Turkey, and Iran. So Iran runs as far north as here, and you have Georgia, and you have Armenia that's to the north. If you look this up online, you'll see where Armenia and Georgia run next to each other, and they're north of here. But then you have Turkey, where you see, on your maps there you see Asia Minor. Well, Turkey runs on over to where it says Armenia here, and you have Turkey that runs over that's boundaries to that to Arat. Now it's interesting, this isn't in your notes, but you have 2 peaks that consist of where it says Mount Arat there. The larger peak is approximately 17,000 feet, and the lower peak is approximately 12,900 feet. And it's interesting, when you look at this, it's known as Little Arat and Greater Arat, also sometimes known as Lesser and Greater, but Little and Greater. And if you look at the pictures, you'll actually see from Armenia, they actually have a picture to your left is Little Arat, and to the right is Greater. and you have that there. The Zagros mountain range, let's see here. If you look in this green area where it says Asher, just south of Ararat, just where the green ends, it kind of runs along to your right of where it says Asher, just above Asher, you'll see it spelled out Zagros Mountains. That runs through there. So that mountain range runs from northwest to southeast along that area there. So you have the Zagros Mountains there. So Zagros Mountains extends northwest to southeast, east of the Tigris River. So you have the Tigris River there. Those mountain ranges are east of that. It formed traditional boundary between Assyria and Media. Media, Media, the Medes and the Persians. It formed an actual boundary between Assyria and Media, and it has peaks above 12,000 feet. The Taurus Mountains, located along southern coast of Asia Minor. If you look on your map again, I'm going to zoom over here. You see where Cyprus, the island of Cyprus is, the Great Sea. If you look north, you have Asia Minor, where you have the yellow and green meet each other. You'll see the Taurus mountain range there. It says Taurus, and it kind of hooks there. You have the Cyprus. If you look at Cyprus and you see how Cyprus has got that, looks like it's pointing. If you go straight off that point and you look toward that point, look up. And if you look up into the green, you'll see Taurus. You have the Taurus mountain range there. It's a mountain complex that lies in the southern part of modern-day Turkey. Southern part of Turkey today. It was the area of Paul's birth. Of course, you have Saul of Tarsus. Tarsus would have been south of here, and he would have been born close to this mountain range. Many peaks are between 10 to 12,000 feet, and that forms that area there, that boundary. And now the Lebanon's mountain. You've heard of Lebanon. Of course, there's a modern-day Lebanon. You had Lebanon even in the time of Solomon. Very interesting part of the country, very interesting part of the world. Of course, you've known the cedars of Lebanon. Is it still up there? Yeah. Okay. Let me try another. Just a minute, because I want to point some things out. I want to be sure I have the right map here for you all. You should have a map of Palestine. A map of Palestine itself. It should say a map of Palestine and surrounding country. Let me get that one open. Okay. Map of Palestine, you're going to look north of Galilee on that one. The Lebanon Mountains, there's actually two mountain ranges. There's the Lebanon Mountains and the anti-Lebanon mountain range. And if you look on your map there, you should have that there. Just look north of Galilee, and you'll see Phoenicia. You see that raised area. The one on the left, and you can look up at the screen if you need it. You see two mountain ranges. The one on the left is the Lebanon mountain range, Lebanon Mountains, and the one on the right is the anti-Lebanon mountain range. In fact, if you look up to the top on your map, you can look up here, you'll actually see it spelled out. At the bottom of that mountain range, the anti-Lebanon mountain range, is Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon, which is over 9,000 feet high, and it's located in the southern end of that mountain range. This would have been close to Dan, the land of Dan, the tribe of Dan. That Mount Hermon is mentioned in Scripture. You remember, even in the Psalms, it talks about Mount Hermon and the dew from Mount Hermon. And so you have that. That's toward the end of that mountain range. The Anti-Lebanon's on the east. Mount Hermon is at the end of that. The valley is part of the Great Rift System, which extends from Turkey to Mozambique. The two mountain ranges become the two ranges which are located on the east and west of the Jordan Valley. So you have this, it's running down through, and there's a valley in between, and it will become the Jordan Valley as you go down further south. So you have those two mountain ranges there. Let's go ahead and turn our page. We're going to try to get through the last bit of this. Lands of the Old Testament. Lands of the Old Testament. We're going to try to wrap up. You have Armenia, north of Assyria in the mountains of Ararat. If you look back at your Old Testament map again, your Old Testament map, you'll see that named there. And I got to get to it on the screen. I'll try to zoom back into it. You will look up to the top. You'll see where Mount Ararat is. Just to the left of that is Armenia. Armenia is the land that you'll see in Isaiah 37. Just to the left of Mount Ararat. Isaiah 37. Isaiah 37, look at verse 33. Isaiah 37, 33. It says, "Therefore thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, He shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shields, nor cast a bank against it. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into this city, saith the Lord. For I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake, and for my servant David's sake. Then the angel of the Lord went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses." Well, there was some that were alive, obviously, but in other words, for the majority, they were dead. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh. Remember Nineveh? We should have marked that on your map. Nineveh here is just south of Armenia in that land that's labeled Asher there in the green. Nineveh sits right on the Tigris River, and just north of there is Armenia. Now, look at verse 38. "And it came to pass as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch his god, that Adramelech and Shazar his son smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia, and Esar-Haddon his son reigned in his stead." So they went north. They went into the land of Armenia. They escaped from Nineveh into that land. So you see in relation to Nineveh where Armenia is. So they escaped over the mountain ranges here. They escaped over into Armenia to get away from everyone after they had killed the king. So you see that there. Media is between the Caspian Sea and the Zagros Mountains. If you look on your map, you'll see Media. We'll talk further about that later, but of course Media is mentioned there with Esther. You have the king there. Media is just south of the Caspian Sea. You have Persia. It's south of Media, and it's north and east of the Persian Gulf. So if you go further south, you'll see Persia. The Medes and the Persians, of course, in the Bible. Sumer. This area is at and above where the Tigris and Euphrates come together. It's the location of Ur. It's a major Sumerian, which was a major Sumerian city in the hometown of Abraham. So I don't think it's actually labeled here on this map, but you can just write that in where you wrote Ur. You'll just write that maybe above it or so. But you have Sumer, and that is the land, of course, that Abraham is from. Look at Genesis chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11. That's why when the Lord told him to get to a land, that was a major trek. We think, well, you just need to obey God. Well, yes, you do. But you can see Abraham, he left Ur, went over the Fertile Crescent, and then came down into Palestine. You have Israel there. Genesis 11, look at verse number 31. verse 31, it says, And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees, you see there, to go into the land of Canaan. And they came into Haran and dwelt there. Now Haran, let me see if I marked it on this one. It may be on a map I've not printed out. We'll have to just see if I could catch it on here. Haran should be up, not as far north as Carchemish, but I'm not seeing it on this map here. I'll have to point it out next week. But you have Abram at this point coming up out of the land of Ur, the Chaldees here. You might say, he ran up just to the north of the Euphrates, came up over. Haran should be somewhere in this area where Retzpah, Rehoboth is at, in that area, and then come on back down. You come down into Israel. Oh, excuse me, I'm way off. Sorry. Haran, you have Haran here. See there in the yellow, just above Argob, I think that is. Haran's right there. So you have Haran there. So he came up over through the Fertile Crescent. You would have Abraham coming up through there and down. Babylon, of course, is north of Sumer. It's on the lower Euphrates. If you're going to write Babylon in, you're going to have where it says, just to the right of where it says Uz, you have Babylon there. Babylon is would be right in there. And of course, Assyria, and if I'm going too quick, just let me know if you're missing something. Assyria is going to envelop this area. You have Carchemish. Remember, if you've written Carchemish in, or if you've marked it, you have Nineveh. So you have Assyria where it says Mesopotamia. You're going to have Assyria right in there. Elam is between the Zagros Mountains and the lower Tigris River. Actually, Elam is on there in the yellow, just north of the Tigris, up above where it says Chaldee. If you go to your right on the map, if you're looking at the map, you just go up or upper right. You see Chaldee, Shinar, Elam's right there in the yellow. Mesopotamia, of course, we've already marked. It's already marked on your map. If you look there, above the Euphrates River, up above where it says Land of Uz. If you go north, Mesopotamia is already there. It's just to the right of Carchemish. So you have Mesopotamia. The land of the Hittites. The land of the Hittites. You should have a map of Palestine. Does everyone have that? A map of Palestine. You have the map of Palestine there. I don't think I printed Palestine before the conquest. You do have, okay, very good. All right, so you see the Palestine before the conquest. You see Hittites. The Hittites, the pink there. You have Hittites, but understand the land of Hittites would have ran, in even older times, would have ran even further. If you look at your Old Testament map again, the land of the Hittites at their greatest peak would have ran from where you see on your map of Palestine there, would have ran even up into lower Asia Minor. So you have the Hittites in that area about where your Lebanon mountains are. Okay? So the land of the Hittites would have been right in there. Syria was northeast of Palestine. So if you're looking on a map, let me get this one open. You would have, if you're looking on one of your maps, if you want to write this in, looking on your map, you can mark in on your Old Testament map. You can look where Lebanon is, where the Lebanon mountains are. Just to the right, you have Syria. On this map here, this is the Empire of David. Just to the right of the mountains of Lebanon, you have Syria. You have Syria. So Syria was northeast of Palestine. Phoenicia should already be on your Old Testament map, but that's also just north of Israel. Phoenicia is north of Palestine between the Mediterranean Sea and the Lebanon Mountains, so it sits on the coast there. Remember the Syro-Phoenician woman? You have Canaan, of course. Many of y'all should know where Canaan is. It's where modern-day Israel is today. And it's west of the Jordan River. If we were to look on another map, let me get to it. Journey of the Patriarchs here. Canaan, if you look on your Old Testament map, it's just right. Let me just get that back open. Yeah, wait for it. Now my computer's thinking about it. Oh, now my maps want to stop working. That's nice. Well, yeah, we'll be good. The program just decided it didn't like me anymore. So Canaan is going to be this area right here. You see where it says Samaria? That's the land of Canaan, of course. Where Judah, Samaria is at, that's your land of Canaan. This is the land that the people would go in. They'd cross the Jordan River on the other side of Jordan and conquer the land. Philistia is the coastal plain of Palestine between Joppa and Gaza. If you look at your map that you have there in front of you, your Old Testament map, we see where it says Philistines there. That's Philistia. This area between Joppa and Gaza. Or Gaza. Depends upon who you talk to. And of course, Egypt, you know where that's at. You should have already made a note of that or marked it on your map. But it's the land in Africa along the Nile. Of course, it's first referenced in Genesis 12:10. And you have Joseph is taken down there. And of course, you have Abraham that journeyed down in there as well, and others. All right, so I said this at the start, and I'll say it again. These notes are very important because this gives you an overall picture of your Old Testament world. These are foundational because if you can remember where key points are on the map, this will help you as we talk about things in more detail, as we talk about an area. You'll know, oh yeah, Egypt's down here, and Asia Minor's up to the north, and you have Ur of the Chaldees. When Abraham journeyed, he journeyed over through the Fertile Crescent, over the Euphrates, and down into Canaan. So you'll know those things and you'll understand those things. I know it's a lot to take in, and I hope I haven't overwhelmed you or bored you. But if you can get this, this is very foundational for you to understand how things work and how things are in the Bible. We'll look further into Palestine next week. I do appreciate it. Thank you all. That is the class for tonight. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to talk to me. You can talk to me tonight. You can talk to me tomorrow. And if I can be of any help, please let me know. But thank you all so much. That is the class for tonight. Thank you.